The millionaire stormed out of her luxury SUV, furious someone had brushed against her designer coat. An elderly black woman, slow on her cane, apologized softly. The millionaire didn't care. She slapped the woman across the face. Gasps erupted through the parking lot. The old woman didn't fight back. She just looked at her with tired, knowing eyes. She whispered, "5 minutes. That's all it'll take for you to wish you hadn't laid a hand on me." The millionaire froze. Before we begin, subscribe to our channel and comment where you are watching from so we can bring more stories like these. Morning sunlight spilled across the city like golden silk, warming the glass towers of the upscale shopping district. Expensive cars crawled along the private lane leading toward the plaza, the kind of place where every handbag cost more than someone's rent. And the smell of luxury lingered like perfume in the air. And stepping out of the back seat of a sleek black Maybach was Victoria Langston, late 30s, CEO of a global retail empire. Millionaire many times over. Every inch of her radiated confidence, sharp, polished, unshakable confidence. She wore a custom-tailored cream suit that hugged her frame perfectly, a diamond necklace subtle enough to look tasteful, yet expensive enough to excuse any cruelty she felt like dispensing. Victoria moved with the energy of a person who believed the world should part for her. And usually, it did. She didn't walk. She glided, chin high, sunglasses hiding her calculating eyes as she surveyed the plaza. She had a business deal scheduled with an international partner inside a boutique. A merger worth nearly $500 million. The kind of day she lived for. Her driver rushed around to open her door, but not fast enough. "Took you long enough," she muttered without looking at him, adjusting her coat. "If I wanted slow service, I'd call a cab." He nodded silently. He'd learned not to respond. When Victoria stepped onto the pavement, the first valet immediately scrambled toward her. "Good morning, Miss Langston. Welcome back." "Don't greet me. Work," she snapped. Her voice sliced through the morning air, drawing glances from people nearby. Some looked annoyed. Most looked afraid. A few simply stepped aside, unsure if they should bow or hide. Victoria took a moment to admire her reflection in the boutique window. Perfect. Untouchable. Power, the kind she believed was earned through money and domination. To her, kindness was weakness. Politeness was optional. And humility? That was for people with nothing to offer. She checked her phone, scoffing at the messages piling up. Her assistant, "Reminder, you're meeting Miss Garcia in 30 minutes. Her accountant, "Quarterly report ready for review." Her ex-husband, "You forgot to sign the school documents." Victoria rolled her eyes and slid her phone into her designer bag. Children, responsibilities, people she once claimed to love, all just obligations now. Her world was numbers, contracts, deals. Human beings were obstacles or stepping stones, nothing in between. As she walked deeper into the plaza, store managers straightened their backs. Employees subtly adjusted displays. A barista even nudged a coworker hard enough to spill milk, whispering, "She's here, the difficult woman from last month." Victoria didn't hear it, but she wouldn't have cared. She was used to all eyes following her. Fear was respect in her world. Footsteps tapped behind her as her assistant jogged up, panting. "Ma'am, sorry, traffic was crazy and—" "You're always late," Victoria said flatly. "Maybe hire someone competent to replace you." Her assistant looked down, swallowing back embarrassment. Victoria didn't notice, or didn't care. Ahead, luxury storefronts shimmered as morning staff arranged displays. A boutique owner opened the door just for Victoria, holding it patiently. She breezed in without acknowledgement. Behind her, several employees exchanged exasperated looks. They all knew her. They all hated when she came, but they smiled anyway, because smiling was safe when Victoria Langston entered a room. Across the street, with her cane tapping lightly against the pavement, walked Sergeant Ruth Coleman. Late 70s, a small, slow-moving figure with silver hair tucked neatly beneath a knitted hat. Her clothes were simple: a faded blue cardigan, comfortable shoes, and a canvas tote hanging from one shoulder. She had just finished a checkup at the VA medical clinic nearby. Routine blood pressure check, updated prescriptions, nothing serious, but nothing she could ignore. Her knee hurt a little today. The winter air made old injuries stiff. Still, she smiled at every person she passed, offering soft greetings. "Good morning, sweetheart. Careful on that curb, young man." "Lovely scarf, dear." People knew her around here. The retired war medic who volunteered at shelters, who patched up kids' scraped knees, who listened to veterans talk about nightmares and loneliness. She was the kind of person the world needed more of, and the kind of person the world often overlooked. Ruth paused near the fountain, leaning slightly on her cane as she watched a mother fix her child's jacket zipper. Such small things brought her peace. Her phone buzzed, a reminder to pick up bandages for the clinic later. She nodded to herself and began walking again, steady and slow. Two worlds, two women, two lives that had no reason to cross. But fate doesn't always wait for permission. Victoria walked out of the boutique after signing some documents. Her assistant followed nervously, carrying bags Victoria didn't even want. Gifts offered by the boutique in exchange for her presence. "Make yourself useful," Victoria said, without looking back. "Return the ones I don't want." "Yes, ma'am." "And don't mess it up this time." "Yes, ma'am." Victoria adjusted her coat and headed toward the next store, the one where she would finalize the massive business deal she'd been chasing for nearly a year. She was already imagining the headlines. Victoria Langston expands her empire again. Self-made CEO dominates market. She could practically taste the victory. She turned a sharp corner, and Ruth Coleman, moving slowly with her cane, didn't see her coming. Their shoulders brushed, barely. Ruth gasped lightly, startled. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. My balance isn't what it—" Victoria froze. Her jaw tightened. She turned her head slowly, eyes narrowing behind her sunglasses. And in that single moment, the world held its breath. Two women, one accidental touch, a spark of arrogance meeting a lifetime of dignity. A small misstep, about to become a storm. The plaza breathed money. It was in the polished stone underfoot, the glass storefronts, the quiet hum of soft jazz leaking from hidden speakers. It was in the customers too. Designer shoes, glittering watches, shopping bags that weighed more in status than in actual mass. Victoria moved through it like she owned the place. In her mind, she did. She hadn't even really registered the gentle brush of Ruth's shoulder. To her, it was just another inconvenience, another obstacle in motion, another human speed bump. Ruth, on the other hand, felt it immediately. Her cane wobbled for a second as her center of gravity shifted. She caught herself with a small, practiced adjustment. The kind that comes from a lifetime of knowing your body doesn't always cooperate the way it used to. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear," Ruth said, voice soft and genuine. "My balance isn't what it—" Victoria's head snapped in her direction. The sunglasses stayed on, but you didn't need to see her eyes to feel the sharpness of her stare. Her whole posture stiffened, shoulders squaring, chin lifting. Her assistant slowed behind her, sensing a familiar incoming storm. Ruth's apologetic smile faltered under the weight of the silence. She clutched her tote bag tighter, her fingers brushing against the edges of prescription bottles inside. "I didn't mean to—" "Watch where you're going," Victoria said, her tone chilled steel. No greeting, no, "Are you all right?" No grace, just disdain. Ruth blinked, surprise flickering across her face like a cloud passing over the sun. "Yes, of course," she murmured. "Again, I'm—" Victoria was no longer listening. Her phone buzzed in her hand. She glanced down at the screen. From board chair. "Investor from Tokyo is already inside the boutique. Don't be late." She typed back with quick, precise fingers. "I'm never late. They'll wait." She slid her phone away, already dismissing the minor contact with the elderly woman as nothing more than noise in her day. To her, the real world happened in contracts and signatures. Everything else was background. She stepped forward again, heels clicking sharply. Ahead, a valet jogged to catch up from the side entrance, cheeks flushed. "Miss Langston," he called, slightly out of breath. "I was coming to assist with your car details. You should have already done that," she snapped without slowing. "If I have to look for you, you're useless." His face fell. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize. And stop calling me ma'am. It makes me sound old." He nodded, swallowing hard. "Yes, Ms. Langston." Behind her, a young barista from the corner cafe watched the interaction through the open doors, lips tightening. She shook her head and whispered to her coworker, "That woman is a nightmare. I hope I never have to serve her." Her coworker glanced toward the entrance. "Is that the one who yelled last time because her coffee was too warm and not hot enough to scare her?" "Yeah," the barista muttered. "The same one who said we lowered the prestige of the plaza because we let regular people in." They shared a knowing look, the look of people who had dealt with too many customers like her. Victoria didn't hear them, or rather, she had trained herself not to care whether she was liked. Respected? Yes. Feared? Definitely. Liked? Irrelevant. The more people kept their distance, the more powerful she felt. As she approached the luxury boutique where her meeting would be held, a teenager bumped into an employee holding a stack of folded sweaters, sending a couple of them tumbling to the floor. "I'm so sorry," the boy's mother said, scrambling to help. The employee smiled kindly. "No worries at all. It happens. Please don't worry." Victoria scoffed loud enough to be heard. "Unbelievable," she said, rolling her eyes. "If people could control their children, stores wouldn't look like yard sales." The mother froze. The employee stiffened. But nobody said anything. No one ever did. Victoria thrived in the silence of people too afraid or too tired to push back. Inside the main walkway, Ruth continued moving slowly, cane tapping in a steady rhythm. Step, tap, step, tap. Her knee ached, but she was used to pain. The years had given her a deep tolerance for discomfort, physical and emotional. She knew what real suffering looked like. A near-miss bump in a shopping district barely registered on her scale. Still, something about the woman's tone sat heavy on her chest. Not because she'd been insulted before. But because that sort of coldness, that careless sharpness, it always reminded her of some officers she'd served under. Men who hid their own fear and insecurity in cruelty. "Always someone who thinks rank means more than humanity," she muttered to herself, lips twitching into a wry smile. As she reached the corner cafe, a barista lit up at the sight of her. "Good morning, Miss Coleman," he called. "The usual tea?" Ruth's face brightened. "Yes, please. Bless your heart. I could use it." "On the house," he said. "Oh no," she protested. "I can pay." "You already paid," he said with a grin. "Years ago, When you patched up my uncle after his car accident. He told us about you. You're not paying for tea here." Ruth chuckled. "You keep saying that and I'll get spoiled." Behind them, a couple at a table smiled warmly. They knew her too. Everybody who worked in this area did. She was the gentle presence that floated through their workdays, asking about their kids, listening to their worries, telling old funny stories from her service days, without ever bragging about the things that would have made anyone else famous. But Victoria didn't see any of that. She wasn't looking. She stepped into another high-end store, snapped her fingers at a sales associate, and demanded, "Someone bring the latest handbag line. And not the display ones, the ones you keep in the back for your important customers." The associate forced a customer service smile. "Of course, Miss Langston, right away." As she walked past the entryway, she saw an older gentleman holding the door open for Ruth, whose cane made the heavy glass difficult to manage. "Thank you, sweetheart," Ruth said warmly. "Always, Sergeant," the man replied. Victoria's eyes flicked briefly in their direction. She didn't recognize Ruth, didn't hear the word sergeant, didn't see the subtle respect in the way people in the plaza treated her. All she saw was what she chose to see. An old woman, moving slowly, in her way. Her assistant caught up again, tablet in hand, brow furrowed. "Ms. Langston, I just got a text," he said. "The investors are early, and they're already asking for you." "Then tell them to wait," she replied sharply. "Anyone doing business with me can learn patience." "But ma'am, they said they have a tight flight connection and—" "I don't care if they're flying to Mars," she snapped. "I don't rush for anyone." He nodded, shrinking back. "Yes, Ms. Langston." As they stepped back out into the main walkway, Victoria's gaze swept the plaza. People parted without thinking, stepping aside, diverting, making space. Not because they admired her, but because they feared becoming her next target. In her mind, though, she interpreted all distance as deference. She noticed Ruth again at the very edge of her vision. Small frame, cane tapping slowly as she made her way along the walkway, bag weighing down one shoulder. "Someone should create a special lane for old people," Victoria muttered, half under her breath. "They're always in the way." Her assistant gave a nervous laugh that died almost immediately. "Or maybe we could slow down a little?" he suggested quietly. Victoria turned her head, eyebrows arched in disbelief. "You can slow down," she said. "I'm not built for small lives and small speeds." He looked away, ashamed of himself for even trying. A nearby store clerk overheard and shook her head. "Lord," she whispered to a coworker, "she really thinks money makes her more human than everyone else." Her coworker sighed. "Money don't change character, it just turns up the volume." Victoria kept walking, completely unaware that every interaction was stitching together a growing picture in the minds of everyone watching. Powerful, rich, cold, cruel. And on the other side of that plaza, Ruth was building a different picture with each step. Gentle, respected, loved. The universe had set the stage. One woman who thought fear was respect. One woman who valued people above all else. Their paths were drawing closer again, like two lines destined to intersect no matter how far apart they began. And soon, a moment would arrive that not even Victoria's money, status, or ego could control. One light bump, one reflexive reaction, one slap heard round the plaza, and everything she believed about power would start to crack. The plaza buzzed with weekend energy, steaming coffee cups, shopping bags rustling, shoes clacking on polished stone. The air carried the scent of fresh pastries, cologne, and early sunlight warming expensive storefronts. Ruth Coleman had just stepped out of the cafe, a small cardboard cup of chamomile tea warming her hands. She steadied herself on her cane, making her way toward the crosswalk. Her steps were slow but sure, measured, careful. Meanwhile, Victoria Langston strode out of a boutique with the force of a thunderstorm. Assistant behind her, luxury bag swinging on his arms, irritation radiating from her like heat. "Tell Miss Garcia, I'll only wait 10 minutes," Victoria barked into her phone. "If she's not inside that store by then, the deal's off. I don't partner with people who can't respect my time." She hung up and shoved the phone into her purse with unnecessary force. Her assistant hesitated. "Ma'am, maybe we should—" Victoria waved him off with a flick of her wrist. "Don't start, Daniel. My day is long enough." Several shoppers paused, subtly turning away, not wanting to get caught in her line of fire. Victoria started walking again, her heels clicking like gunshots against the stone. That's when it happened. Not because Ruth wasn't careful, not because Victoria wasn't watching, but because fate has a habit of putting truth in people's paths. Ruth stepped forward, adjusting her tote bag to relieve pressure on her shoulder. Her tee shifted slightly in her grip. Her cane tapped unevenly against the curb. Her balance dipped for just a second, and her arm brushed Victoria's. A feather-light touch. Barely contact at all. Ruth gasped softly, instantly apologetic. "Oh, I'm so sorry, dear. My balance." She didn't even finish the sentence. Victoria spun around with a speed that shocked even her assistant. "Are you serious?" she snapped. Before Ruth could steady herself, before the crowd had time to understand, before anyone could intervene, Victoria's hand came down with a sharp, cracking slap. The sound sliced through the open air like a whip. The plaza fell silent. Ruth staggered, catching herself on her cane. Her teacup crumpled in her hand. Liquid splashed across the pavement. Several people gasped. A child clapped his hands over his ears and started crying. A barista shouted from the cafe door, "Hey, you can't do that!" Ruth didn't fall, but the hit had landed. She lifted her head slowly. Her cheek reddened. Her breath trembled. Her eyes shimmered, not with pain, but with something deeper. Disappointment. Victoria stood over her, chest heaving slightly, sunglasses still on, as if the eyewear alone could hide the ugliness beneath. "Next time," Victoria spat. "Watch where you're going. I don't have time for stumbling old people blocking my path." Daniel, her assistant, froze, pale, horrified, yet paralyzed by his boss's presence. People around didn't move. Some recorded. Some covered their mouths. Some stared at Victoria with pure disbelief. One woman whispered, "Did she really just slap her?" Another replied, "Oh my God, she hit an old lady." Ruth straightened her cardigan with trembling fingers. Her face softened, not with fear, not with anger, but with the weary grace of someone who had survived far worse than a slap. She looked up at Victoria and whispered, voice barely audible, "If you knew who I was, you'd never have touched me." Victoria scoffed loudly. "Oh, please," she said, flipping her hair. "You're not anyone important enough to matter." Ruth didn't answer. She simply stood still, leaning on her cane, allowing the moment to breathe. Victoria turned sharply and walked away, expecting the crowd to do what they always did: stay silent, forget, move on. But no one moved. A woman near the cafe shook her head slowly. A young father picked up his crying child and held him close, glaring at Victoria's back. Daniel whispered urgently, "Miss Langston, we should—" "I said I'm done here," she snapped. "Let's go finalize the deal." She strutted away, believing the moment was over. But the plaza didn't forget. Eyes followed her. Phones pointed discreetly. Whispers spread like ripples in water. Ruth gently breathed out and closed her eyes for a moment. She whispered to herself, "You've faced worse, Coleman. You faced worse." She leaned heavily on her cane, gathering her strength. Just then, a young barista rushed out from the cafe. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked softly. "Do you need water? Should we call someone?" Ruth smiled faintly, forcing a steadiness she wasn't sure she fully felt. "I'm all right, sweetheart. Just a little shaken." Another woman stepped forward. "We saw everything. That woman's disgusting." Ruth shook her head gently. "No, she's just lost. People like her think power comes from the loudness of their voice." She touched her cheek lightly. "But real power? It comes from something else entirely." A murmur swept through the onlookers. Nobody realized a man across the plaza, in uniform, had already started making his way toward them. And that cameras weren't the only thing recording the moment. Because Ruth Coleman wasn't just an elderly woman. She wasn't just a victim. She was someone whose name carried more honor than Victoria Langston's wealth ever could. And the woman who slapped her was about to learn exactly who she had touched. The plaza remained frozen in the aftermath of the slap. The shock still hanging in the air, like dust caught in sunlight. People lingered, unsure whether to comfort Ruth, chase after Victoria, or simply process what they had witnessed. Ruth stood quietly near the cafe entrance, one hand lightly pressed against her cheek, the other gripping her cane for balance. Her breathing was slow, steadying itself, as if she had learned long ago how to calm storms that others would crumble under. Then a commanding voice cut through the unsettled silence. "Ma'am, are you all right?" A man in uniform was striding toward her, tall, broad-shouldered, moving with disciplined urgency. His badge glinted under the morning light. Captain Elias Ward. The moment Ruth saw him, her eyes softened with recognition. She whispered, "Elias?" He reached her side in seconds, lowering himself slightly so he was eye level with her, respectful, concerned. "Ma'am, what happened? I saw a crowd." And then I heard someone say. A woman nearby raised her hand shakily. That woman slapped her, the rich one, in the black suit." Captain Ward's jaw tightened. His eyes sparked with anger. But he contained it, the way soldiers learn to hold lightning in their chest. He turned to Ruth with a gentleness that contradicted his stern posture. "Who touched you?" he asked softly. Ruth inhaled slowly, then exhaled. "No need to cause trouble, son." But trouble had already found its way, because the truth was already spreading. Another bystander stepped forward, a teenager in a hoodie, holding up his phone. "I recorded it," he said. "Everything, even the slap. I can send it to you." Captain Ward nodded, voice low but firm. "Please do." Ruth shook her head weakly. "No fighting. Not today." Elias placed a steadying hand near her shoulder, not touching her, but reassuring her with presence alone. "Ma'am, I won't fight, but I will make sure you're safe. You deserve that much." Before she could protest again, someone else pushed through the crowd. The store manager, a middle-aged woman with a name badge that read Tara, Director of Operations. Her face was pale, her hands trembling. She looked at Ruth, eyes widening in shock. "Oh my God," Tara whispered. You're Sergeant Ruth Coleman, aren't you?" Ruth smiled modestly. "I used to be." Suddenly the crowd shifted, curiosity turning into awe. Tara covered her mouth. "I knew I recognized you. You're the one who ran the medical tents right after Operation Solace. You saved, oh God, you saved so many." Captain Ward stood a little taller. He nodded respectfully. She saved my commanding officer and 3 civilians caught in crossfire, and she refused evacuation until everyone else was out first. Gasps rippled through the crowd, but Elias wasn't finished. She's also a decorated field surgeon, multiple commendations, a humanitarian award recipient, and she still volunteers at the Veterans Clinic when her legs allow. People stared at Ruth with new eyes, eyes filled with respect, with gratitude, with something Victoria would never understand. One mother pressed a hand to her heart. She was slapped? Her? The teenager shook his head. That lady didn't know who she touched. Captain Ward's eyes hardened. She didn't deserve to touch her at all. Ruth's lips curved into a faint, almost sad smile. You all must stop making a fuss, she murmured. I'm just an old medic with a cane. But nobody believed that for a moment. Tara stepped closer, voice trembling. Ma'am, we need to file a report. This cannot go. No, Ruth interrupted softly. Captain Ward looked at her with a quiet, steady determination. You were assaulted. That matters. Ruth sighed. Son, this happens sometimes, she murmured, and then she interrupted him with a steady determination. Son, just a moment. Captain, the video's blowing up already. Someone posted it 3 minutes ago. It's everywhere. Elias pulled out his phone. Notifications flooded the screen. News outlets, community pages, veterans groups, influencers demanding accountability. And every post said the same thing. Millionaire slaps elderly war hero in broad daylight. Ruth's eyes widened slightly, not from pride, not from fear, but from disbelief. Oh dear, she whispered. I didn't want this. Elias closed his phone gently. It's out of your hands now. He turned to the crowd. If anyone sees that woman again, notify security. She needs to come back and answer for what she's done. Someone pointed down the street. She went that way, toward the executive lounge area. Elias nodded. I'll handle it. He turned back to Ruth and spoke quietly. I'll bring her back to apologize. Not because you need it, but because she does. Ruth touched his arm lightly, a soft, tired gesture. Be kind, Elias. She's lost. Lost people lash out. He nodded respectfully, but the fire in his eyes didn't soften, lost or not. She hurt someone she shouldn't have. And it's time she knew exactly who you are. He straightened, adjusting his uniform, and walked with purpose toward the direction Victoria had gone. And the crowd parted for him, like he was carrying a sacred duty. Because he was, Ruth remained standing, steadying her hand on her cane as the wind shifted around her. Someone whispered behind her, "She's a hero." Another added, "And that woman hit her like she was nothing." Ruth closed her eyes briefly. "I've been nothing to people before," she murmured, "but that doesn't make it true." The truth was out now, and the slap that was meant to shame her was about to expose Victoria instead. The shopping district had never felt heavier. Sunlight still glimmered across the boutique windows, but the mood had shifted entirely. The air felt charged, like a storm rolling in without clouds. People weren't shopping anymore. They were watching, whispering, checking their phones. The video of Victoria slapping Ruth was spreading faster than wildfire. A teen near the fountain refreshed his feed every few seconds. "Dude, it's already at 12,000 shares." His friends stared. "No way." Another refresh. 18,000. Another 27,000. Each second, the world was learning what had happened. Victoria, however, walked as if the plaza still belonged to her, heels striking with confidence, chin raised, blind to the tidal wave chasing her steps. Her phone buzzed, then vibrated again, and again. She sighed dramatically and finally checked the screen. 32 missed calls, 18 texts from her PR director, a dozen messages from her board. Her brows folded in irritation, not concern. "What now?" she muttered. Behind her, Daniel, her assistant, struggled to keep pace. "Miss Langston," he said, voice uneven, "I really think we need to stop and—" "Not now," she snapped. "Ma'am, I really think something is—" "Daniel, for the last time." A call came through. Her largest investor. She answered with forced charm. "Hello, Mr. Nakamura. I was just on my way to—" His voice exploded through the phone. "What have you done?" Victoria froze mid-step. I don't. "The internet is on fire," he shouted. "Did you strike an elderly woman on camera? A veteran?" Victoria blinked. Her chest tightened. "Wait, what? Veteran? What video?" She didn't finish, because Tara, the store manager, marched down the walkway with 2 mall security guards, all 3 of them wearing expressions carved from stone. Behind them walked Captain Elias Ward. His posture was straight, his jaw locked, his eyes burning with controlled fury. Daniel whimpered under his breath. "Oh no!" Victoria stumbled backward slightly. "What is this? Why are all of you—" She didn't get to finish that either. Customers were staring. Store employees stepped out of their shops. People gathered like witnesses to a trial. Every phone pointed straight at her. The storm had arrived. Elias stepped forward, his presence swallowing every inch of the walkway. "Victoria Langston?" "Yes," she said, voice shaky for the first time. What's going on?" He narrowed his eyes. "You assaulted Sergeant Ruth Coleman." Victoria scoffed reflexively, the last dying spark of her arrogance. "I didn't assault anyone. Some old woman ran into me, and I defended myself." The crowd exaggerated it. There were gasps, shocked mutters. Daniel shook his head slowly, stepping away from her. Elias tilted his head slightly, the way a soldier does when deciding whether to reprimand or roar. "You slapped a decorated war medic," he said. "A woman who saved more American soldiers than you employ in your entire corporation." Victoria blinked, genuinely thrown. What? She's who?" Tara stepped forward, voice cold and clipped. "She's not just an elderly woman. She's a hero in this community, and you hit her." Victoria's face began to pale. Daniel whispered, "You should have listened earlier." Another buzz vibrated in her purse. Another call, another notification. Elias continued, his voice low but powerful. "The video has gone viral. Local news stations have already reached out. Veterans groups are organizing a response. And your own investors are demanding accountability." Victoria's mouth dropped open. "Viral? Why would anyone—" The teen who had recorded the slap stepped forward. "Because people like you don't get to hit old ladies and walk away." Another person muttered, "She thinks money makes her untouchable." A mother holding her child shook her head. "My daughter cried because she saw you hit someone." Every direction Victoria turned, accusation. Every face she saw, disapproval. Every step she tried to take, blocked. Her world had finally realized it didn't have to fear her, and that terrified her. Mall security positioned themselves behind Elias, ready to escort her. "Miss Langston," Tara said, "for the safety of our patrons, we need you to return to Sergeant Coleman, immediately." Victoria's eyes widened. "Return? To her? I am not—" "It isn't optional," Elias growled. Victoria's breath quickened. "Why?" she snapped desperately. Elias stepped closer, lowering his voice until it was a heavy whisper. "Because you owe her respect, and because the world is watching." They escorted her back toward the cafe, where Ruth stood, surrounded by people offering seats, water, support. Ruth held the cup, Daniel had picked up for her. She stood tall, even with a cane, even with a stinging cheek. She didn't need a uniform to command a room. Victoria approached cautiously, the crowd parting for her, not out of respect, but out of disgust. Ruth turned her head slightly. Victoria flinched. The elderly woman's calm eyes held something Victoria could not understand, something she had tried all her life to bury in others. Dignity. Ruth's voice was gentle. "I told you," she said, "you'd never have touched me if you knew who I was." Victoria swallowed, her throat tight. I didn't know." Ruth lifted her cane slightly, adjusting her balance. "That's the problem," she replied softly. "You don't know anyone. You don't see anyone." Victoria blinked hard, breath trembling. Crowds leaned in. Phones recorded every second. Mr. Nakamura's voice still echoed in her mind. "Fix this, or you're done." Her entire empire, her reputation, her wealth, her power, all depended on what she did next. Her voice cracked. I'm sorry." Ruth studied her face carefully, not for weakness, but for sincerity. Captain Ward crossed his arms, waiting. The plaza fell silent. Ruth nodded once, slow, thoughtful. "An apology is a start," she said, "but words without change mean nothing." Victoria looked down. Her shoulders trembled. Her arrogance had been stripped bare. Ruth continued softly. "Now, what are you willing to do?" Victoria didn't know, but she was about to find out, because humility was coming for her, whether she welcomed it or not. The plaza had become a courtroom. Phones still pointed. People still watched. Silence wrapped around the scene like a tight rope. Victoria Langston, the woman who once demanded the world part for her, now stood trembling in front of a quiet, injured veteran. Ruth Coleman didn't raise her voice. She didn't glare. She didn't strike back. She simply looked at Victoria with a gaze that felt heavier than anger, a gaze that carried decades of sacrifice, pain, discipline, and humanity. Victoria couldn't look away. Captain Elias Ward stood just behind Ruth, arms crossed, jaw tight, eyes sharp. He looked like a man ready to defend the elderly woman with his life if needed. Security guards flanked the sides, creating a semicircle. Ruth lifted her chin slightly. Her cheek still glowed faint red where Victoria had struck her. But she stood straight, dignity stronger than any bruise. "Tell me something," Ruth said softly. Her voice was calm, too calm. Victoria swallowed. "Yes?" Ruth's eyes didn't waver. "Why did you hit me?" Victoria opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her lips trembled. Her breath hitched. She tried again. I don't know," she whispered. Ruth nodded thoughtfully. "You don't know," she repeated, her tone neither mocking nor accusing, just heartbreakingly honest. "You reacted without thought, without compassion, without seeing me as human." A few people in the crowd murmured. Victoria flinched, her hands shaking slightly at her sides. Ruth's gaze remained steady. "You saw someone you thought was beneath you, someone slow, someone in your way." She paused. "Tell me I'm wrong." Victoria felt the air thicken around her. She couldn't breathe, couldn't blink, couldn't pretend anymore. "You're not wrong," she whispered. Ruth took a small, steady breath. "Do you know how many young soldiers I saw hurt because someone else thought they were in the way?" she asked quietly. "How many people I carried, bleeding, through dirt and explosions and fire?" Victoria blinked rapidly, eyes burning. "I didn't know." "You didn't need to know," Ruth said gently. "You just needed to be kind." Victoria's breath broke. I'm sorry," she whispered again, voice trembling. Ruth stepped a little closer, cane tapping softly. "Sorry for which part?" she asked. Her tone wasn't cruel. It was intentional. Victoria hesitated, but the truth pushed through her tears. "Sorry for hitting you." Her voice cracked again. "Sorry for treating you like less. For treating everyone like less." Ruth corrected softly. Victoria nodded weakly, tears spilling despite her attempts to hold them back. "I don't know why I'm like this," she confessed, voice barely audible. This time, Ruth's gaze softened, truly softened. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "Arrogance isn't born. It's built, brick by brick, sometimes by fear, sometimes by pain, sometimes by emptiness." Victoria's shoulders trembled harder. The crowd had shifted now. Less angry, more somber. Ruth continued, "But when you hit me," her voice slowed, gentler now, "you weren't slapping a stranger. You were striking every lesson you never learned." Victoria covered her mouth, sobbing quietly. "I never meant to hurt anyone," she whispered. Ruth nodded. "I believe you," she said, surprising everyone. "But intention doesn't erase impact." Silence engulfed the plaza again. Captain Ward stepped forward slightly, his voice calm but firm. "Ms. Langston," he said, "you need to understand exactly what your actions caused." She wiped her eyes. I know I messed up." "No," he said softly, "you didn't mess up. You revealed yourself. Now you have to decide if you like the person you saw." Victoria's knees almost buckled. She steadied herself against a pillar, hands trembling violently. Ruth studied her for a long moment, not with superiority, but with the wisdom of someone who had seen many people break before rebuilding. "Victoria," she said gently, "you don't need to be strong in the wrong ways anymore." Victoria looked up, tears clinging to her lashes. What do you mean?" Ruth took a breath that carried decades of pain and love, war and healing. "I mean, strength isn't in the hand that strikes," she said. "It's in the hand that helps." Victoria closed her eyes. More tears. She whispered, "I don't know how to be that person." Ruth reached out, slowly, and lightly touched her arm. Not forgiveness, not friendship, just a human touch. "You learn," she whispered, "and you start today." Victoria opened her eyes, stunned. Ruth nodded once more, as if sealing the decision. But Elias stepped forward again, voice stern. "Miss Langston," he said, "your apology is noted, but apologies alone won't repair the damage. What you did was wrong, deeply wrong, and there are consequences." Victoria nodded, ashamed, small. What do I do?" she whispered. Ruth answered before Elias could. "You take responsibility," she said. "You change your behavior. You give back what you've taken from people. And you learn to see humanity where you used to see inconvenience." The crowd murmured in agreement. Victoria nodded again, eyes red, mascara smudged. "I want to," she whispered. "I'm ready to." Ruth tilted her head gently. "Are you?" she asked. Victoria took a shaky breath, and for the first time in her adult life, she didn't bluff, didn't fake confidence, didn't mask her fear. "Yes," she said quietly. "I really am." Ruth looked at Elias. He nodded. The breaking point had passed. Now came the rebuilding. The crowd slowly thinned, but the air still felt heavy, like the tension refused to fully dissipate. People whispered as they stepped away, glancing back toward Victoria, as if unsure whether to hate her or pity her. Hours ago, everyone avoided stepping in her path. Now they avoided stepping near her, for a very different reason. Victoria stood there, breathing unevenly, mascara streaked, palms damp, her designer heels suddenly feeling too high. too unstable, too unworthy. Ruth remained calm, unmoving, cane gently pressing into the pavement. Security hovered close, unsure whether to escort Victoria out or escort her toward responsibility. Elias Ward cleared his throat with the authority of a man who had commanded soldiers. "Ms. Langston," he said, "your board is requesting your presence. Immediately." Victoria's head snapped up. My board?" she whispered. "Already?" Elias gave a short nod. "The video is everywhere. They want answers." Victoria's stomach dropped. Her life, built on control, dominance, perfection, now felt like it was unraveling like a loose thread she'd been too blind to notice. A younger security guard, clearly uncomfortable with the tension, stepped forward. "Ma'am, your company car is waiting." Ruth held up her hand. The guard froze. Victoria blinked, stunned by the quiet authority in that gesture. Ruth took a deep breath, shifted her weight slightly, and looked Victoria straight in the eyes. "Before you run off and face the world," she said softly, "you need to face me." Victoria's breath caught in her throat. "Of course," she whispered, stepping closer like a child preparing to be scolded. Ruth studied her, not cruelly, not angrily, but with the deep perceptiveness of someone who had seen broken people try to fix themselves before. "You hurt me," she said simply. Victoria nodded, eyes dropping. "I did," she whispered. "I'm ashamed." Ruth's voice remained steady. "But shame without change is just ego wounded." Victoria flinched, because the words hit exactly where her greatest flaw lived. Ruth tapped her cane gently. "Do you know why people avoid you?" Her voice wasn't mocking. It was honest. Victoria swallowed. I assumed it was because they respected me." Ruth shook her head slowly. "No, they fear you. Fear and respect are not the same thing." Victoria's chest tightened. She breathed out shakily. "I never meant to." "I know," Ruth said, "but you did. And now it's time to choose the person you plan to be from here on." Victoria wiped her face with the back of her hand, taking deeper breaths. "I want to do better," she whispered. "Good," Ruth said softly. "Then you'll start by serving the people you once looked down on." Victoria hesitated. "Serving? How?" Elias stepped in. "Your board already contacted me," he said. "They have decided to keep you on one condition." Victoria braced herself. "You must complete a full year of community service," Elias said. "Specifically, at Sergeant Ruth Coleman's veteran clinic." Victoria's eyes widened. "A year?" she repeated, stunned. "At a clinic?" Ruth's gaze softened a little. "You'll learn more in that clinic than any boardroom ever taught you." Victoria opened her mouth to protest, some old reflex twitching, but the words died before reaching her tongue. Instead, she nodded. Quietly, genuinely. "If that's what it takes," she whispered, "I'll do it." Ruth held her gaze for a long moment, searching for sincerity. She found it. "Then we begin next week," Ruth said. "I'll show you how to help people, truly help." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes again. "Thank you," she whispered, "for giving me a chance." Ruth's lips curved into the faintest smile, warm, tired, knowing. "Everyone deserves a chance," she said, "even those who forget that others deserve one too." A few bystanders applauded softly, not mockingly, but respectfully. Victoria didn't bask in it. She didn't flip her hair. She didn't smirk. For the first time in her life, she bowed her head humbly. Elias motioned toward the exit. "Come on," he said. "Let's get you to your board meeting." Victoria wiped her face one final time, but before she left, she turned back to Ruth. "I will make this right," she said. "A vow, not a performance." Ruth nodded. "Not to me," she said gently. "To yourself." Victoria swallowed hard, then followed security toward the waiting car. The plaza quieted. Ruth, leaning slightly on her cane, watched the woman disappear into the vehicle. A young employee from a nearby store approached her cautiously. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked. Ruth smiled warmly. "Physically, yes," she said. "And emotionally?" he asked quietly. Ruth glanced upward, thoughtful. "Emotionally," she said slowly, "I'm hopeful." The sun dipped lower on the horizon, washing the front of Ruth's veteran clinic with a soft, golden glow. Through the glass doors, silhouettes moved gently, patients being guided in, nurses helping them settle, volunteers arranging supplies for the evening session. And among them, moving slowly, carefully, humbly, was Victoria Langston. No designer heels, no assistants trailing behind her, no sharp tone cutting through every room. Just a woman learning to breathe differently, learning to live differently. Ruth watched from the reception counter, cane resting lightly against her leg, expression patient and quietly proud. Victoria approached her after helping a Vietnam veteran into an exam room. Her hands shook slightly, but not from weakness, from the unfamiliar feeling of service. "I didn't realize," Victoria whispered, "how much people carry, how much help they need." Ruth nodded. "That's because you were always looking down at them," she said gently. Victoria didn't defend herself. She didn't argue. She simply lowered her gaze. "I know," she said quietly. "I know that now." Ruth tapped her cane lightly against the floor. "You're trying," she said, "and trying is the beginning of change." A soft silence settled between them. The warm kind, the kind that forgives a little. Victoria stepped outside for fresh air, pushing open the door with her shoulder. The evening breeze brushed her face, carrying a whisper of cool peace, something she hadn't felt in years. As she stood there, watching the sunset bleed into violet hues, a voice filled the scene. Her voice, steady, reflective, honest. "I spent years believing respect came from the size of your account, the brand of your car, the power of your last name." She took a slow breath, letting it out shakily. "But then I met a woman with nothing to prove, and everything to teach." A veteran waved to Ruth inside the clinic. Ruth smiled warmly, the kind of smile that had seen battlefields, tragedy, loss, and still found strength left to give. Victoria blinked back emotion. "She faced more danger in a day than I faced in my whole life, yet I thought I was the powerful one." The camera slowly circled her as she leaned on the railing, eyes softening. "I used to think people had to fear me, to respect me. But fear only makes people step aside." Soft images fill the screen. A nurse handing Ruth paperwork. A veteran patting Victoria's shoulder, thanking her. Victoria helping a patient lift his cane. Ruth guiding her gently, never harshly. Then back to Victoria, standing quietly, humbled. "Real respect," she said softly, "is given to those who serve." A moment of silence. Just the soft hum of the clinic behind her. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them with a small, honest smile. And real power isn't in the hand that strikes. Her fingers curled slightly, remembering the slap. It's in the hand that lifts someone back up. She turned, watching Ruth move carefully down the hallway, helping a patient adjust their coat. Strength wrapped in gentleness. The type Victoria had never understood until now. Victoria whispered, not to the camera, not to anyone else, but almost to her old self. "I had to be knocked down to learn how to stand up as a better human." She exhaled deeply, stepping back into the clinic, holding the door for an elderly man entering behind her. The man smiled. Victoria smiled back, a real one this time. Inside, Ruth lifted her chin slightly in approval. Victoria crossed the room, ready to continue her shift, and the screen faded with her final line. Quiet, sincere, transformed. Respect isn't earned by status. It's earned by how you treat people when no one is watching.